It's time once again for another thrilling episode of Markout Radio. For the next hour, sit back, pull the stick out of your ass, and enjoy. Be warned though, smarks and internet know-it-alls will be offended, annoyed, and generally pissed off at what's about to happen to your ear holes. You've been warned. Now, Markout Radio.
That's right. Markout Radio fans, welcome back to Markout Radio's Nitro, episode 38 of this series. For June 3rd, 1996, out of the Asheville Civic Center, Asheville, North Carolina, hosted by Tony Schiavone, Larry Zbyszko, Eric Bischoff, and Bobby the Brain Heenan. Thank God, still no Mongo on announce. And I believe that he's not making a comeback anytime soon, judging from the fucking promos. Oh, those fucking promos are horrible. All right, let's get to the promos later on in the show. Schiavone shot out of a cannon using every cliche in the wrestling phrase book possible within 4 seconds. Someone called Guinness. Recap of last week's Shark Attack. This week, Nitro defeats Raw in the ratings war 3 to 2.3. There's 4,500 in attendance tonight. 3,518 of them actually paid to be there. Everything kicks off with a Mean Gene promo with the Shark on the ramp with no music until he actually gets to Gene, and then he calls for it to stop. Good adjustment on his part. He is no longer the Shark or an Avalanche. See Earthquake. He is now John Tenta. John Tenta defeats Big Bubba Rogers via countout. I get this one on 1 out of 5. Here's why. The full point goes to the fact that Tenta is breaking away from the gimmicks and he's just being quote-unquote himself, which is in keeping with 90s wrestling. You know, everyone's doing a fucking shoot or a work or whatever the fuck else is going on. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing particularly wrong with it. There are, you know, a couple little shots across the bow, as it were. Schiavone explains that Vader and Bad were advertised as being at Nitro, except that they no longer play where the big boys play. And they haven't for some time, so I wonder which one of Eric's little fucking cronies made that fuck up and how much that ad space cost Turner. Tenta produces a weapon and chases Bubba out of the ring. The ref counts out Bubba, doesn't admonish Tenta for having a weapon or try to take it away. Gotta love Nick Patrick. After this, we get a commercial break with a Sting teaser, followed by whatever the fuck that was from Mongo and Green. Second match of the night faces the Fear. Ming and the Barbarian defeat High Voltage, Chaos, and Ruckus, and I gave that one 2.5 out of 5. High Voltage look great physically, and they have great tandem moveset, but they're green and a little bit botchy. Ming and Barbarian make the Nitro debut of their new matching ring gear, and just the takeaway from this match, the highlight, if you will, the belly-to-belly from Barbarian to Ruckus was insanely well done, leading up to the New Faces of Fear finisher with no name, followed by Ming's big kick that also has no name, and the finish gets a slow-mo replay. Mean Gene with the Stinger and Luger. Luger's on some lewds or something. He's fucking low energy. Even for Luger, he's low energy. Steiners come in to cool things off and set up the main event. After this, we get a Hogan promo. He wants the title. What you gonna do, brother? I don't know. The Giant's gonna step on you like last time? Whatever. But there's a few of these tonight. And to be fair, I understand why they're promoting the shit out of Hogan, because after, what has it been, 6 weeks, he's going to finally be back on the show in some capacity, but I'm still irritated. I know I shouldn't be. I know this is just, it's wrestling, and that's fine, but it's annoying. Sergeant Craig Pitbull Pittman defeats Disco Inferno via Disco Inferno, fucking hell, via submission. I give that one 2 out of 5. There was a shot at the beginning of the match of some cougars at ringside. I don't know. They look like grandmas. What's that called? Like panthers or something? What the fuck is it called when you're a gilf? But these weren't gilfs. Like these weren't the kind of grandmas you see in porn. Well, I guess it depends which porn you're watching. Pittman enters as the original dude who wears medals to the ring from other sports. He has gold medals from numerous armed forces, wrestling, and boxing championships that he's won over the years. He's a legit badass, and he's a decent wrestler. Too bad he's got the charisma of a wet mop on the microphone. Pittman goes for the code red, but Disco taps out before it's even locked in, and Nick Patrick is actually there to call off the match. Post-match, Disco works to the camera a little bit. After this, we get a commercial break and sort of a teaser of the contract signing between Regal and Sting for the Bash with a very nice worked slap at the end that they replay a couple times tonight. After this, we get Lord Steven Regal defeating Jim Duggan. I get that one 3 out of 5. Regal and Duggan work the crowd forever, and I would be annoyed if it wasn't good. Regal would work the crowd into heat. Duggan would work them to a pop. It was just back and forth. It was like a wrestling match without the wrestling. It was actually kind of clever. It was old school wrestling, really. It was going over, and Shivani and Zbyszko put it over in their own heel and face ways, so that's always good. This is the first time we've heard the crowd all night, and they are into this match. The rest of the Blue Blood stable came down to interfere. Eaton and Jeeves distract the ref while Taylor takes the 2x4 away from Duggan. Again, foreign object. Zbyszko nails it on the recap. The foreign object with the fucking 2x4 and then the tape knuckles. So Zbyszko recaps the fact that Duggan's just a big fucking cheater on the slow-mo recap, completely glossing over the fact that the Blue Bloods came down to the ring in the first place, which I thought was absolutely on par with being a quality heel commentator. After this, we had a Gene in-ring promo with Regal, Eaton, Taylor, and Jeeves. Apparently, oh, Jesus, Regal got a fine and paid double for the fine so that he could have credit for more of his shenanigans. During the replay, some fan got into the ring and shouted on Gene's live mic to call the police. Eaton and Jeeves recover first and launch the guy out to security waiting at ringside. Ultimately, Regal's, after this promo, is setting up a match with Sting at, what I believe he thinks is a match with Sting at Bash. But later on tonight, Sting challenges Hall to a match at the Bash too. So we're not really quite sure what's going on here. And that I'm sure that Sullivan will blame it on Hogan's intellectual rights in his contract, even though he hasn't been there for 6 weeks. Sure that'll be. Speaking of Sullivan, he squashes the fucking holy hell out of Prince Iaukea. The match, it gets a solid
0.0.
Before the match, Benoit Sullivan have a build promo. This legit heat was building for months before Eric became aware of it and started pushing for them to work a program together. A full year before Benoit allegedly stole Nancy from Sullivan, according to Sullivan's shoot interviews, by the way. Prince Iaukea was brought in to be a huge mid-card face, but Sullivan comes out and just squashes the kid. He squashes a kid that was literally brought in to help him prop up the mid-card as the fucking booker. I think the problem here is that, like most of us podcasters, Sullivan just likes to hear himself talk. And so he signs up for any goddamn fucking shoot interview possible so that he can push his side of everything, right? And of course, since Nancy and Chris aren't around anymore to refute it, he can basically just run away with the whole fucking thing. So Sullivan is legitimately the booker, mostly of the mid-card, but also he has some input into what happens in the main event. He does throw Hogan under the bus pretty much every chance he gets, which, listen, I can empathize with that. But for the most part, when Hogan's not around, it's him and Bischoff booking most of this shit. So anything that fucks up on the show is partly his fucking fault. Like, Bischoff's the actual VP, so Bischoff's the one that's going to get fucking raked over the coals. But Sullivan's legit the booker. So Bischoff brings in a mid-carder. I can't imagine he did it without Sullivan's input into it. Brings in this Prince Iaukea, who's, of course, not at all from any island anywhere. But they bring in this kid because he's got a marketable gimmick, and they're going to push him as a solid, big mid-card face. And his very first match was on Saturday night, which he won. It was a good match. There's nothing wrong with it. It was a great intro. It was a jobber match, but there's nothing wrong with that. But now is his premiere episode of Nitro. He comes out. He gets no moves in whatsoever. Sullivan just whips him around the ring a little bit, stomps on him, and gets the pin. There is that saying, it's your own worst fucking enemy. This is what they mean. Post-match, we get a Gene promo with Sullivan and Hart promoting the Benoit Sullivan Bash match. Apparently, Sullivan only respects Arn and Flair. Not Jimmy Hart or the Giant or anyone else in his own stable. The whole promo was essentially unintelligible. It made no fucking sense whatsoever. And I will happily sit there and watch Macho Man and Warrior promos. So if I can't understand what the fuck you're saying, Jesus. Anyways, we get a commercial break with a Horseman teaser. After that, we get Ric Flair and Arn Anderson defeating the Rock and Roll Express. For those of you who don't know, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. When Flair defeated Gibson in... I can't even remember what the fucking time was on it. I didn't have a stopwatch on, if I'm perfectly honest with you. But the match itself, I gave 4 out of 5. This is Rock and Roll's Nitro debut. Seriously, though, they're a great tag team and can work with a paper bag. They're just a little long in the tooth. I mean, even in 96, there was a great feud between the Horsemen and the Express back in the mid-'80s that was awesome. Eventually, it culminated into a series of title matches between Ricky Morton and Ric Flair that were really quite good. But let's be perfectly honest. Gibson's the one that's got the physique. Ricky Morton's the one that's got the charisma. Ricky Morton got the big push into a little singles thing for, a heartbeat. But ultimately, they stayed a tag team and continue to do spot shows as a tag team. They've never been bodies, okay? But they've always been great wrestlers, and they've always done great promos. Even in their Twilight WCW days, and now even when they do spot shows for various promotions, they still do great promos. And the wrestling, okay, they're old men. It's not going to be what it was back in 96, all right? So Flair and Anderson come down to the ring wearing green and Mongo's jerseys, respectfully. Honestly, it was funny, and it helps them build to the bash match. It was a nice touch that the jerseys were too small for them. Flair loved working with pro sports athletes, as he's always been a big sports fan of pretty much every pro sport. So him signing on to do this match was sort of a no-brainer. Don't get me wrong, this would become sort of Hogan's thing too, working with mostly basketball players, but a lot of that was largely due to TNT/Ted Turner's interest in the NW or NBA, and them having basketball players on just sort of became one of their gimmicks. So this way, though, Flair and Anderson liked working with football players because football players had the size and agility to learn how, arguably, to wrestle. And may or may not be the case coming up in a couple weeks at the Bash. Nitro Hour 2 starts mid-match with some pyro that distracts everyone from the fucking match going on in the ring. There was pyro, a huge pyro display at the entrance ramp with the match going on 100 yards away. I get it. You're in hour 2. I understand we're just starting this whole 2 hours of pro wrestling thing live. But holy hell, just stick with the pyro above the ring if you're going to fucking have pyro to kick off hour 2. Or time hour 2 to when someone's actually coming down to the ring. All right? Anyway, Flair takes a few classic bumps off of the ref in this match. Eric painfully explains why Savage is not on WCW television, and then explains how WCW has given him the green light to go and appear anywhere someone will book him, then goes on to explain that it just can't be on TV. I mean, have you ever sat down and had a fucking 5-year-old tell you a story? You take a long, meandering journey around what the fuck they could have said in about 2.5 seconds. So, Eric, like a child, takes us on a long, meandering journey around Savage is suspended. So that at the end of the show, Savage can call in and accept, well, spoilers. We'll get there in a sec. Heenan leaves the announcing position to go and coach the Horsemen. I mean, anything to get a break from Eric's shitty stories and hot takes. The refs are distracted by Liz, or the ref is distracted by Liz. Woman rakes Gibson's eyes. Arn drops the DDT. Flair rolls over, and the Horsemen get the W. There's a 1-800 collect a slow-mo replay of the final moments of the match so we can see all the cheating in slow motion. After this Gene promo with the Horsemen, Arn puts over the shirt gimmick from earlier. Flair then claims that it was a gift from Deborah McMichael. Gene gets Brain on the stick, and he claims that he won't manage again, but that he will coach. After this, we get a commercial break, the longest fucking commercial break ever, because not only was it an actual commercial break for live television, so 2.5 minutes long. Coming back from break, we get a giant teaser promo, we get a Hogan TNT WCW promo, and then we get the Glacier Hackers workover promo. Jesus. Back on live Nitro, we get the commentators talking about Brain coaching, and then we get a Hogan montage. I'm not going to miss these at all. I mean, no spoilers, but fuck. The only good part about this whole promo was the chair shot concerto that happened during the actual promo. And holy fuck, was it long. I mean, how much money... I hope they got a fucking intern to do it, because that would explain why it was so god-awful. After that, the Giant defeats Ice Train to retain the WCW World Heavyweight Championship.
0.0.
For weeks now, we've been seeing the Giant get booked as a monster heel champion, trying to take away the attraction aspect of his gimmick. But here we are again, one-move squash match, and then he gives Norton 2 choke slams. Now, there's no reason why he couldn't have had a 3 to 5 minute match with Ice Train, but I guess I would have exposed too much how garbage the Giant is at actual match wrestling, while Ice Train is freakishly fast and agile for a 400-pound guy. After this, we get a Gene promo with the Giant, who does ask a legit question. Why are there Hogan packages when the Giant is a champion? Anyways, Giant wants Luger in a match. After this, Scott Norton defeats Hugh Morrus. Oh, Jesus.
0.0.
Are you keeping score at home? That's 3 of them in a fucking show. Anyways, Norton is still selling the 2 choke slams in the ring. Morrus comes down and drops the big leg. Nick Patrick is here, so you know some weird shit's about to go down. No bell rang to start the match. Eric quips that Norton is having a mild seizure, just lying still in the middle of the ring. Norton doesn't actually catch Morrus on the moonsault as he's coming back, but he gave him 3 punches and he got the pin. I can't imagine that even Scott Norton's looking back at that match and going, yeah, that was a quality match. Yep. After this, we get a commercial break with Rick and Luger hitting each other. Teaser, Mongo twists an aluminum can tweezer, and WCW Magazine promo. Back from the break, we get a promo of the tackling dummies training themselves how to wrestle. This is going to go well. Green still has the, he still has the tag. And he's eating a Slim Jim. Well, he's holding it in front of his mouth and gnawing on it like a dog. They need a manager or coach. Oh, right. He's gnawing on a Slim Jim. Oh, yeah, that's clever. Yeah, no. That's Book Savage. I mean, at least this puts a new wrinkle in the Bash match. After this, Sting and Luger in the main event fought the Steiner brothers to a no contest in the Tag Team Championship match. I give that one 4 out of 5. It was actually good. Macho calls in at the beginning of the match in a really horrible pre-tape. Don't get me wrong. I love a good soundboard. God knows I've used a couple of soundboards.
Were you ever touched as a kid?
No, thank you. But, I mean, soundboards are quite fantastic.
You're going to just K-fab me all the way to the very end of this thing, aren't you?
Anyways. It was really pretty awful, but it was funny, sort of, because Brain is then tripping over himself to back out of coaching Horsemen, so it serves its purpose. We get a commercial break during the match, and back, the match with all this bullshit going on was good, because you'd see it sort of off to the side. But after the promos and the commercials are all done, the wrestlers actually shoved it into the next gear, and the crowd was into it. But there's still some piped-in ambient noise mixed in with the live reaction. It was going on all night. I just started noticing it more here because I was watching the hard cam audience and seeing like a smattering of people making noise. And then you could tell when there was a legit pop because it would sound just a little bit different than the piped in ambient noise. But anyways, the match gets called off before the Giant even gets into the ring. Of course, the crowd pops as Sting, Luger, and Scott take on the Giant, and a nice big pop for the Luger clothesline, Giant over the top rope spot, essentially. After this, we go back to the commentating position where Brain begs Savage to reconsider, and with 3 minutes left in the live broadcast, Hall comes out for another promo. This wasn't as infamous as others you may have seen, but this one did include a couple of spots that get used a lot in the recaps of the Monday Night Wars and the birth of the NWO. First was Sting's line of, "You're in the jungle, baby." And then, of course, there was Hall with the big surprise hand over his head thing. That being said, there was a good hardway slap there from Sting to Hall, and the show fades to black on security escorting Hall away, setting up essentially a bash match between... We don't know. The funny thing was that Hall has been pushing this 3-on-3 thing. And of course, we know why in retrospect, right? But I mean, Sting wants the match now. So, I mean, I think that part of the booking that was going on here wasn't accurately explained to the people that were going to be participating in these fucking promos. Because, of course, Sting wants to face him right here, right now, which sort of suits his gimmick, and it's fine. It's just, it was confusing the audience. They didn't know really, well, are we seeing something at the Bash? Are we seeing like an extra match tonight? Are we seeing like another match next week? What the fuck are we seeing? I think the point was to try to encourage the viewers to tune in next week. Problem is that Raw's going to beat Nitro next week in the ratings. And it's going to beat Nitro in the ratings next week because of the shit matches that were going on tonight. There are 3 0.0s. Now, granted, those are my ratings and not like the ratings of the average viewing audience, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's pretty fair to say that when I'm rating a Nitro as being shit and then the next week the ratings reflect that, look, I'm not spoiling myself by looking ahead to see what happens. I'm rating the shows as they come up, and you can tell when shows are going to stink up the joint. So it is what it is. Like I said, despite the matches being garbage, the overall show was pretty good. It was paced out much better than the first 2-hour show. The fans weren't exhausted by the main event. Almost everything that happened tonight built towards the Bash pay-per-view, including the birth of the NWO. The score suffers due to overall poor matches and some booking nonsense, but at least we're on the tracks here and building towards pay-per-views and building feuds. So overall, I'll give the show a 3 out of 5. And that's really all I can say about this week. It was sort of a hodgepodge of Sullivan just really being in charge of everything and what happens when that happens. Because next week, I don't want to spoil what happens next week, but like I said, Raw is going to take off in the ratings, not by a huge margin, but WCW's been on a fairly decent run as of late. So the fact that Raw doesn't edge out. Well, I mean, it does edge out Nitro. But with the inclusion of all the Scott Hall stuff, with all of the building for the Bash, this should really be drawing in more viewers. And Nitro's been on a run. I mean, back 3 weeks ago, 3.1 to 2.3. Last week, 2.8 to 2.3. This week, 3 to 2.3. It's like Raw has reached their zenith of whatever their ratings are going to be, and Nitro's now gathering up new viewers and all the disenfranchised WWF viewers. But with the garbage matches this week, next week, next week, Raw takes the win for the last time for the next couple of years. And that's, I'll leave it there. Let's just leave it there. Producer boy.
Well, that was an abortion of a show. Should the mood take you, check out markoutradio.com and leave a comment. You can also find links there to our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Stitcher channels. You can even leave a voicemail on our Skype. Just click the links and share them.